Coming to Kickstarter this June, John Haynes at Death's Door, the man who rules the world, takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the standard and variant editions of John Haynes at Death's Door and lots of other great stretch goal rewards on Kickstarter this June. I was watching a That Indie Comics Guy video where he was talking about how YouTuber Young Rippa was going to spend over $100,000 to launch his Rippaverse line of comics. Now, your young Rippa59 is looking to compete with Marvel and DC Comics and other small independent publishers like Boom and IDW with his Rippaverse line of comics, and it looks like he's taking big risks in the hopes of getting a big reward. However, I don't know if the risks are going to be getting him those rewards, because he's spending a lot of money up front, and that money up front may not return as fast as he thinks it is, because in the publishing industry, over 90% of all books fail, so it's the 10% of books that are going to carry the 90, so I don't know if this gamble is going to pay off. Now, your young Rippa59, I believe, thinks that the comic book marketplace is the same as it was in the 1990s. Now, back in the 1990s, you had artists like Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane who decided to leave lucrative jobs at Marvel Comics on popular books like Spider-Man, X-Men, and X-Force to go start Image Comics. And they started Image Comics because they wanted to get more creative control over their stories, and they also wanted to control their intellectual property and own all of the intellectual property rights, because as they were working for Marvel Comics, they were working on a work-for-hire basis, and they were only being paid per page. But if they worked on their own intellectual properties, they would not only own those characters, but they would be able to license and merchandise those characters. And this is what made Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane millionaires, because as they launched Image Comics, they went out here and they made millions off Spawn in comic sales, licensing, and merchandising, Wildcats, and Youngblood, and these creators managed to make big profits from their own intellectual properties. And I believe that's one of the reasons why your young Rippa59 is looking to launch his Rippaverse. The other is he says that he's tired of what they call SJW comics, but I believe he really needs to think critically and not get too caught up in his feelings about the SJW comics and really start to focus on the business of publishing. Because if you don't focus on the business of publishing, you may wind up making major mistakes as related to the launch of the Rippaverse. Because the whole thing is that when you're spending six figures on a whole line of comics and you don't know much about the publishing business, you may run into obstacles in the learning curve as related to the publishing marketplace. Now, I myself ran into that learning curve back in 2009 when I started the SJS Direct imprint. And when I started the SJS Direct imprint, yes, I knew some things about the publishing industry, but I didn't know about other aspects of publishing a book, like hiring the right artist to design a cover, or going out here and knowing how to market directly to people on social media. I made a lot of mistakes in 2009 when I launched All About Marilyn, in that I was doing my own covers, which was a major mistake. And another major mistake I made was ordering lots of copies, thinking people would be interested in my book the same way I was enthusiastic about my book. And when I went to take the book to bookstores, I ran into a lot of resistance, and a lot of those people, they weren't interested in stocking my book. So in 2009, I had spent a couple of $1,000 getting All About Marilyn to the marketplace, and at the end of the day, I was stuck with a whole 2 cases of books that I could not even move. So that was a major mistake for me that cost me some serious money, and I thought I would be able to make that money back very quickly. But the whole thing with the whole publishing marketplace is that a lot of books, they're very good books, but they just can't, you just can't really reach the audience by approaching bookstores. You have to go to social media directly. And that's where young Rippa59 has an advantage with his Rippaverse comics. He has a large audience on social media, and that large audience could go out here and pick up his books, hopefully, but he has to learn about the learning curve as related to comics. Now, he's spent over $125,000, as that indie comics guy has said, on as related to his comics, and the whole thing is spending so much money up front without understanding how to get a return. This could backfire on him if he doesn't know what he's doing. Now, from my experience, if you're going to go out here and do independent comics, you really cannot focus too much on the stores. No, you're going to have to focus on trying to sell to the audience directly, and you're going to have to focus on trying to get the audience to go out here and pick up your book at every time you do a live stream or you do a video. So that's how you're going to get most of your sales as related to books. And if your young Rippa59 understands that, he'll be able to move a lot of Rippaverse comics if they are of high quality. Now, I'm hoping that they are of high quality, because if he goes out here and he hires the right artist and he has good stories, then he might have a shot at having some success at selling some comics. But if he goes out here and he's spent a lot of money on comics and they're just directed at trying to not be woke comics, he might wind up alienating a good portion of his audience, because you can't go out here and just go, I'm against the SJWs and the woke types. You have to go out here and put together a very solid story. So when you're out here doing comics and you're creating comics for the audience, it has to be a solid, well put together comic book that leaves a strong first impression on the reader. So a lot of people, they talk about, oh, how bad the SJW books are, but you have to have something to offer the reader. And multiple titles, that's a major risk as I see it as a publisher. You really don't want to launch too many books all at once. Now, when I started SJS Direct, I launched one book all about Maryland in 2009. Then I launched The Temptation of John Haynes in 2011, and All About Nikki the Fabulous first season. And then I started to move into the ISIS series of books in 2012. I took it really slow because after I saw the losses on All About Maryland, I realized that I couldn't just keep spending money to get cases of books that were just going to sit in a closet and not go anywhere. And I couldn't go out here and keep spending money trying to put together product when the audience was really small at the beginning. No, I had to take my time and start out slow, and that's the reason why you see many indie comic creators these days, they only do maybe one issue a year because they want to see where the audience is before they go out here and start spending serious amounts of money. I mean, from my own experience working on SJS Direct books, I've learned it's just easier to just go slower and launch maybe 1 to 2 books a year than go out here and launch a bunch of books and then some of those books don't sell, because every book that doesn't sell costs you money, and every book that doesn't make money is a loss for you. So the better thing I believe for him to do would have been to just launch one comic, see where the audience is, see where the sales are, and once you see where the sales are, then you can go out here and say, okay, I'll launch another title, and we'll see where the audience is on that book. And then once we see where the audience is on that book as related to sales, then we'll start thinking about launching another book. Now, again, I've done this before, and I didn't want to lose a lot of money, so I said, okay, I'm just going to cut one book this year, one book next year, because when it comes down to publishing, you have a 90% chance of losing everything you invest in, because the customers may not want this book, and then you're stuck with all the cost as related to that book that customers just didn't want. So that's why I was very cautious when I started going out, and that's why I'm still cautious going into this whole comic book game, where I'm just doing one comic this year, the John Haynes at Death's Door, because I want to see if the customers are there, I want to see if the readers are interested, and I want to see if they're going to fund the Kickstarter that I'm launching. So I want to see where if there's money to be made as related to this kind of project before I launch other projects, because when I look at the young Rippa, he's spending a lot of money up front, and that could come back to bite him, because if you're spending six figures and you don't have an audience there, you may never recoup the cost of your books, because in the publishing business, again, it's 90% of the books fail, and it's the 10 that have to cover the 90, and if you're spending six figures, you may wind up losing almost all of your money before it's even spent. That's why most creators like myself go out here and we only spend a little bit on one book to see how it's going to go, and if it goes, then we might go out here and launch other books. Now, last year I did the Esteem No Good Deed comic, and now I'm doing the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, and I would love to do an ISIS comic, but it all depends on the sales, and it all depends on the readers coming out and putting in the pledges for the Kickstarter. Now, your young Rippa59 also goes on in the video that indie comics guy talks about, and he says that he wants to do crowdfunding outside of Kickstarter, and that might not be a smart thing to do, because Kickstarter and Indiegogo are trusted platforms, and while they do take a good percentage of money, like 5 to 10% out on fees, the whole thing is it's a trusted platform, and the customers know that the platform has a reputation. They don't know if young Rippa59 has a reputation for delivering on the goods. But people who go to Kickstarter, they know they're going to get what they're supposed to get in most cases. And when you go on a platform like Kickstarter, you have a reputation that's trusted. Now, I know that some have issues with platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo as related to so-called identity politics and wokeism, but the whole thing is that a trusted platform is a place where customers feel safe about spending their money, and that's where young Rippa59 could run into some serious trouble, because customers, if they don't trust your platform, they're not going to want to spend money on your products to get them off an outside platform. Now, this is one of the reasons why I've used Amazon for years, because Amazon is a trusted platform for my books, and it's also why I use other platforms like Barnes & Noble, the iBookstore, Smashwords, and Google Play, because these are trusted platforms, and the customers know that they can get their products on those trusted platforms and not have to worry about not getting anything. So I look at young Rippa. He's making a lot of big moves, but I don't know if he understands the learning curve, because there's a major learning curve for publishing books, and if you don't know how to navigate that learning curve, you could lose a lot more money than you expected. Now, I have gone out here and I've spent money on things when I was learning the learning curve, and I lost a lot of money on printing books. I lost a lot of money shipping books to book clubs. I lost a lot of money trying to learn how the business worked, and that was a hard lesson for me, and I don't want to see young Rippa59 go through the same sort of learning curve where it's really rough, and I'm hoping that he has advisors to help him navigate the publishing world, because you could go out here and launch a lot of comics, like the recent video I did on Sick Media Comics, and leave a bad first impression. But you don't want to do that. You want to go out here and launch as many good books as possible in order to leave a good first impression on the reader. And you want to be able to sell those books to the reader in a way that really gets them excited about the product. So that's why I would say, you want to not talk too much about the SJWs. You want to talk about how great the books are, because that's what's going to get the customer excited about buying the books. people don't want to hear about identity politics and social justice. They want to hear about how great your stories are, how great your characters are, how great the action is in your comics. That's what's going to really build the word of mouth as related to your stories, and that's what's really going to get people excited about picking up your books. I mean, I wish that young Rippa has great success as related to his Rippaverse, and I'm hoping that things work out for him, but he has to be aware of the publishing learning curve, because if he's not aware of the publishing learning curve, he could wind up losing a lot of money, and instead of becoming the next Image, Boom, or IDW that competes with DC and Marvel, he could become another footnote in comics, similar to that of Charlton or First Comics or Malibu or some of the other smaller indies. And that's all because you didn't understand how the publishing world works. Now, I myself am still learning all about publishing, even though I've got like 10 years running SJS Direct. I'm still learning about publishing, and publishing comics is a completely different challenge. And you have to go out here and work with different artists. You have to go out here and work with letterers. You also have to work on your marketing plan, and you have to understand where you want to go with the comic that you're working on. Like right now on John Haynes at Death's Door, even though I've got all the art and all the lettering done, I'm in the final stages of getting ready to do the marketing and promotion, and I've been talking to other comic pros and learning from them, and also learning more about the business, because I understand I only get one chance to make a good first impression, and that first impression is the most important thing, because if you don't make a good first impression on the readers, they won't be back for the next book. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with this Kickstarter that's going to be launching on Wednesday. I want to be able to leave a powerful first impression on all of the viewers out there, all of the potential readers out there, and I'm hoping that young Rippa has great success with his Rippaverse, and I'm hoping that he understands that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and the road is a really rough one, and you can't come in thinking that you're just going to go and try to get back at the SJWs. You have to focus on it as a business, and you have to focus on servicing the customers that you're looking to get. It's all about the customer. It's not about the so-called SJWs or the woke types. It's about giving the customer an action-packed quality story and giving them a story that has them anticipating the next issue and possibly looking to go pick up the back issues. If young Rippa59 focuses on those business aspects, he can have great success in the comic business, but he has to go out here and really focus on his business and not really be focused on going into back and forth with SJWs, because if you're focused on the SJWs, you'll be just as broke as they are, and you won't be able to go out here and make the profits as related to building the business that you're trying to start. Now, my comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, will be available on Kickstarter this Wednesday, and if you want to pick up the first comic with the man who rules the world, you can get that comic this Wednesday when I launch the Kickstarter. And if we can get the project funded, I have a lot of awesome stretch goal rewards I want to offer people, but I'm just waiting to get this project funded, and I can hopefully get that project funded with your support. So I hope you'll be there on Wednesday for John Haynes at Death's Door. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's Aspiring Angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.